Well, thank you very much for joining us on another installment of Insect Pest Management videos. Today we are in a watermelon field treating for cucumber beetles, and I thought that this would be a good time to explain some of the nuances of a drip chemigation application. These watermelon plants are too big for what we're doing today. They are flowering, there are honeybees that are starting to work them. Ideally, you do not want to make a neonicotinoid application within about 10 days to 2 weeks prior to honeybees getting placed in a field. Read those labels and think about those labels carefully. But the purpose of today's video is to discuss some important considerations when making a drip chemigation treatment. First thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you don't have holes and punctures in your drip tape, or you don't have an end that has come untied or hasn't been tied. Because if you start up your pump and you start up your product right away, you'll get a fountain of product and stuff. And your plants aren't going to get the water they need, they're not going to get the product, and you won't get the protection that you expect out of that application. The second thing that you need to do is to prime your system. So you want to run it for probably on a commercial field 20-30 minutes before you start injecting product in. Now, I am not a chemigation specialist. We have other extension personnel at University of Delaware that can help guide you through the complete setup and calibration procedure for making a chemigation application. The purpose of today's video is to discuss the rates. So in this setup, this is a pretty slick setup. I had a previous technician build it for me. We can apply insecticide in 3 or even up to 4 beds at a time. And, oh, here we go. Let me switch this over. So we pressurize our tank with CO2. Low pressure, about 10 to 15 psi. And then we swap over to our tank with insecticide. 3 gallons to prime, 3 gallons of solution, and then 3 gallons to flush. We got all of our fittings and connectors so that we can valve off and block off just this plot from the rest of the drip tape from our friends over at Vincent Farms. And so I'm very appreciative of their support in building this setup, and also my previous technician, Joe. So when making an application through drip tape, you want to check your insecticide labels very carefully. Many, but maybe not all of them, will have a rate conversion chart for the amount of product to inject per 1,000 row feet of drip tape given a specified bed spacing. So here we've got 7-foot centers on these beds. If you don't pay attention to that, it's really easy to think of this as a banded application like you would for herbicides. And in a banded application, your treatment area is what you calculate for filling up your spray tank and adding product into that tank. With an insecticide, that is not the case. If you do that with an insecticide, you will under-apply by a certain amount. So these beds are roughly 2 feet wide, 7-foot centers. So our bedded area is 2 divided by 7, which is roughly 40%, 1/3, somewhere in there, 30%. And if you make that thinking that this is the only treated area in the field, and then you adjust your rate accordingly, you will under-apply the material by that 30-40%. The reason being is when you do the calculations from the amount of product for 1,000 row feet of drip tape to your planted acreage, it comes out to being the same. So what that means is this is a 3-row plot. We've got a 26-foot segment of drip tape that we are injecting insecticide into. So it's 26 times 7 for the bed spacing times our 3 rows, and that gives us our plot area. Then we use that plot area divided by 43,560 to get our amount of acreage. Then we multiply by the rate. Say on Admire it's 10.5 fluid ounces, and that'll give us a very, in a small plot setting, a very small number. We convert to mils so that we can measure out mils, and we've got roughly 4 mils of product in this tank. Otherwise, if we just use the amount of plastic and not the full bed spacing, we would be putting maybe 2 mils of product or 1.5 mils of product into the tank, and we'd have a serious under application. So check your labels, and if the label doesn't specify that, that's how you do the proper calculation. It's the amount of planted acreage, not your bed or your plastic acreage. Second thing that I want to mention is there are insecticides that are bee safe. These are not. The neonicotinoids, you do not want to make this application within 2 weeks of pollinator placement in the field. If you do that, you run the risk of killing honeybees. So with cucumber beetles, we can plant plants really early in May, and in a good year, those plants can grow a lot, and we don't get, some late season frost injury or some other freak weather event. But the beetles might not roll into that field until the end of May or maybe the first week of June. What that does is, one, it changes how many beetles we need before we can justify an application. As the plants get bigger, they can tolerate a lot more beetles. Small plants, fewer beetles. But the second thing is, it's possible that beetles start rolling in large numbers when pollinators are already active in that field, and then you need to think long and hard about how you're going to treat those beetles without using a neonicotinoid like imidacloprid, thiamethoxam, or clothianidin. Acetamiprid, which is a sale, is more bee safe than the other neonicotinoids, and that one does have a foliar application. You don't want to make that application when bees are out foraging, so you want to spray in the evening or at night. Second thing is, there are other insecticides that are bee safe that are allowed to go into the drip, like products like Verimark and Coragen. And for those of you growing fruiting vegetables, you can put that product in the drip. It'll translocate up through the foliage, and it will protect your tomatoes from worm pests, and for an extended period of time. Other advantages to drip applications: flexibility with weather. You don't have to worry about it raining as you're making that application, or within a couple of hours and washing product off of leaves. And then finally, you've got less off-target impacts. So you don't have the drift. You don't spray a potentially broad spectrum material all over the plants and then kill off some insects that you want to keep around. So it's a much more targeted type of application. So I hope that helps, and I hope that you'll think about these things. And if you are in doubt, contact your local friendly county extension agent for assistance and guidance as you make a chemigation application, and you don't undercount, and you get glorious insect kills and glorious good looking produce at the end of the season. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.